with your hosts, Bill Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Luckily, we turned them over at the end of the first half there, and were able to convert and then kind of go back-to-back threes coming into the locker room to give us a big enough cushion. But it is what it is. It's late February. You get a home win against a conference opponent, you take it and you run.
Marquise was forced to do a lot, and some of that not having Shelton, you just that's what he does. But we needed more bench play. I mean, we can't play those guys up. We can't see the minutes exactly. We had three guys almost play double-figure minutes and didn't scratch, and that just puts too much pressure on your starters.
I was very confused that Coach Staley was addressed from Jim Sterk's comments. Still don't quite understand exactly what the intent was. I do believe a retraction is necessary from Jim Sterk's comments.
Yeah, it has not been a good day if you're Jim Sterk.
Or the state of Missouri, for that matter. You
picked the fight with the wrong individual, I would say. And finally, welcome back to Earth, to the SEC commissioner. Glad to see you're alive and well and finally doing something once again. You probably know by now that Dawn Staley, USC women's basketball coach, has filed a lawsuit against the Missouri athletics director. The SEC today fined him $25,000 finally for his remarks going back. How long's it been?
3 weeks.
Yeah, took him 3 weeks. Didn't take him that long to
3 weeks
to nail Frank Martin.
Actually, 3 weeks.
Yeah. So as the world turns in the SEC, this thing is not over by any means. I'm not even sure now, since the lawsuit has been filed, if he were to come out and publicly retract and apologize, if Dawn would withdraw the suit, or she wants her measure here.
She would.
You think she would?
Yeah, because we talked about that. She kept it at $75,000 so it wouldn't be a federal case.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
so she didn't want to make a federal case out of it.
Very nice. I'll let you have that one.
Yeah, that's good. Put your name on that one.
The thing that's very interesting about this whole situation is, and you can see this in the statement made by Commissioner Greg Sankey. He said that he had hoped that this was something that could be mutually resolved between the athletic programs and the individuals involved. That speaks very clearly to what I've been trying to say for the last 3 weeks, and the fact that he wanted this to be handled quietly and go away. Well, it never did. And he said, unfortunately, mutual resolution does not appear imminent. Our hope is we can direct our focus back to where it belongs on our student athletes and on-court competition. And in addition to that, to placate the Missouri side, a word that David Cloninger used, and I will appropriate to him, they basically said that they're going to look at the policies and the security procedures at Colonial Life Arena. I think we all can agree that they're probably one of the best of any facility that we go to on a daily basis when it comes to security, and they will find that South Carolina acted appropriately.
Just show them the yellow rope.
Yeah.
They actually had extra security because Missouri was coming in.
And that's something that Ray Tanner said.
But you could tell that the commissioner is a guy who reads Napoleon, meaning that Napoleon always said you don't air your dirty laundry in public, and that was what he was hoping would happen with this. But
this could have been nipped in the bud, as Barney would say.
Yeah, nip it.
Just by Sankey coming out quickly enough and either fining the Missouri AD or ordering him, if he has that power, to make a public apology, because there's no evidence to support anything that he has said. South Carolina, as you pointed out, has as much security, if not more, than anybody in the league for its men's and women's basketball games.
It's almost overboard.
They took that extra security. Well, South Carolina got to the point with rushing the floor that they had run up their fines from the SEC. So they started putting this rope out. Now, they're not roping off the whole arena at this point in time like they used to, but
they rope off basically the student section now.
They're still pretty strong with their security. And if he'd had some evidence, if he could have come to the table and said, look, I've got audio, video evidence of what I'm saying, that would have been one thing. But then here is where he is just a complete loser in this situation. Here is a white man in a power situation taking on a black woman who's also in a position of power.
And a very well-liked one at that fact.
Absolutely. Not only is she a statewide figure, she's a national figure.
International.
Well, international too, but in terms of USA basketball and all that, you're going to lose. You're just flat out going to lose in every court you might go into, beginning with the court of public opinion. So he painted himself into a terrible corner. He should have fixed it right away, and this would have gone away, as you say, everybody wants, and probably so. This is a bad look for the SEC. You look at the national media outlets, they've got the headlines, Staley suing the Missouri AD. That's got to be one of the last things that the commissioner of the SEC wants to see, a coach in his league suing an AD of a rival school.
Well, the other part of this, too, is the fact that you look at South Carolina and you look at Missouri and the fact that this is kind of going back and forth. You wonder if the actions taken by the SEC could be an action to try and get South Carolina, or at least get Dawn Staley, to retract the suit. I don't know if that will happen, but I also think it's a PR stunt by the SEC to try and come out and save face. But I also think that Dawn Staley, I keep saying South Carolina, I mean to say Dawn Staley, I don't think she has a good case to actually bring forth, because in a libel or slander case, as my comm law professor once said long ago to a somewhat hungover Will Pelagic at Neff Hall at the University of Missouri School of Journalism, you have to prove actual malice when it comes to a libel or slander case. And in the case of a public figure, the burden of proof is a little bit different, because a public figure is open to some sort of criticism.
But
so
she could have an argument in that he has injured her personally and also injured her professionally. Comments like that hurt you in recruiting. You go around the country, you're recruiting nationally. She's involved with the #1 player in the country. She's got to sit down and explain to that girl and her family the comments that this AD has made. Things like that do come into play in recruiting circles and can be an injurious situation for Coach Staley.
Yeah, and I was thinking this guys, because let's face it, perception is really reality, and even in the court of law, where you may have a case that's really minimal in this day and age with Twitter and Snapchat, you can try a case outside the courtroom, and maybe in the courtroom you're found absolved of it, but in the court of public opinion, guilty as charged.
Well, that's the other part of this. There's a gap between the fact that, yes, his comments were in poor taste and his comments were false, but there's a gap between that and what you're actually able to prove in the court of law. And I don't know if Dawn Staley has enough to go on to get them to actually have her pay the $75. I think that's more of a symbolic nature, just to try and, again, drag this man rightfully through the mud.
Well, I think if he refuses to come forward and retract his comments, I'm not sure if an apology falls in line with all that, but if he refuses to do so, then I think she should keep her the pedal to the metal and move forward with this thing with her attorney handling it while she continues to coach her basketball team.
Next step is he has within 30 days to basically respond to the motion, to either file dismiss or settle it out of court, or pushing forward with litigation. So the next response will come from him one way or the other.
And I guess an ancillary part of this is he not only really besmirched Dawn Staley's reputation, he besmirched the reputation of this fan base that she's built from the ground up. And part of maybe her feeling about this suit is not only her, but what you said against these fans that will show up tonight for senior night for Asia Wilson. You said some nasty things about my fans.
And when you've built that type of fan base, and you built a fan base for women's basketball when one previously didn't exist, that's a real hard statement to make if you're Jim Sterk.
Interesting, too, the timing of the announced fine today. How it comes out the same day as the lawsuit is announced.
About 5 minutes after it was announced.
You think there's no coincidence behind that?
I mean, that makes you kind of wonder what's going on. We'll be right back.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
I did talk with USC Athletics Director Ray Tanner this afternoon. Of course, he is tied up with the affairs over at the arena tonight for the last home game for USC. And
don't say tied up; it's a sensitive subject
An
these
affair.
days. These days,
An affair.
He's tied up in an affair. There's
people-
something going on in Missouri involving both of those things.
You people, keep your mind out of the gutter for 5
Well,
minutes.
I mean, there is something going on involving being tied up in an alleged extramarital affair involving one of the
Missouri,
governors.
right.
In one of the governors.
Right. Well, maybe he should have gone for a hike on the Appalachian Trail and let his nerves calm down a little bit. But anyway,
Different.
where was I? Oh, I talked to him. Couldn't comment on the litigation, of course. He will join us tomorrow night on Sports Talk
I'm
to talk
looking
about
forward to
some
that.
things. So look forward to having him with us. Coming up, we've got maybe somebody as knowledgeable as Ray Tanner in some things, not all things. Mike Morgan at the bottom of the hour. We will have with us a little bit after 7 o'clock another edition of Give and Go, hoping that both the giver and the goer will be with us. Aaron Lucas is good. Hopefully Jordan Roper will be available as well. We'll have the Money Coach at 7:30. Fran Halloran with another edition of his look into sports and money here on Sports Talk. And, of course, coverage from last night. USC wins at home against Georgia. I believe in both games they played Georgia this year, they held Georgia to 57 points. And the Gamecocks sweep the regular season series.
That's correct.
From the Bulldogs, 66-57. You were at that game. A very good defensive effort. Once again, they're now starting to get back to playing with the effort, the intensity defensively that Martin expects. And that helps them overcome their shortcomings on offense, which, there are still many shortcomings on offense.
Right.
You shoot 31% and you still win a ball game, then you're doing it defensively.
Well, they won the earlier ball game shooting only 27%, so 31 might actually be a welcome percentage. They made just 21 baskets for the game. They shot 68 times, and only 8 of those were 2-point buckets. That's the one thing that Frank Martin said after the game, is that they needed to make more 2-point buckets, but they get 13 threes, and they knew they had to make threes in order to win. Felipe Haase was somebody who really showed out after we had been talking a lot about Jason Cudd and his contributions. Haase gives them 27 minutes, 12 points, including 2 of 6 from downtown. And the one thing, too, that's very, very key for South Carolina is the fact that you like to say, as Chris Silva goes, the Gamecocks go. I would amend that by saying, as South Carolina's point guards go, South Carolina, because when Wes Myers and Asani Gravett are distributing and also playing good on-ball defense, that keeps South Carolina in every ball game they play.
Well, I thought South Carolina from a execution standpoint outweighed Georgia's guards. Georgia's guards, if there's any guards that's been more inconsistent at the point position than South Carolina, has been Georgia. And that's why South Carolina not only controlled their guards, but made sure that they kept Yontae Maton down. They've done that twice this year, doing something that I thought he was stubborn enough not to do. And Frank Martin has gone to that zone. Remember, say, I never play a zone. Oh, yes, you will. Because he said last year that Matt Figure had to pull his chain to get him to play the zone. And that zone was real good for South Carolina.
Zones for cowards, right?
17 turnovers the Gamecocks faced. They committed force. They only committed 5, 18-5. The difference in points off turnovers, that was the difference in the ball game. 18-4, the difference in that category, and that's the big difference in a 67-57 win. Brad Brownell, 3 straight losses for the Tigers now. He's starting to feel the effects of not having Dante Grantham, not having Shelton Mitchell last night, and getting nothing. His 3 bench guys, Clyde Trapp, Mark Donnell, Scott Spencer, they combined for 0 for 9 from the floor, 0 for 2 from the line. No points from 3 guys off the bench. All 3 of them basically got double-digit minutes. Donnell got 9 minutes. The other 2 had double digits. So as you heard in his comment to open up the broadcast, getting nothing off your bench from those 3 guys, having to play them to rest some regulars, it hurts when you get nothing off your bench.
Yeah, but I also don't think that he has a lot of trust in those guys, which I don't understand because Mark Donnell had 10 points in 13 minutes against Duke and played very, very well in the first half. And then they played him in the second half against Duke, and he said, quote, "I didn't love it." Well, give them more of a chance. Like, that's the other point, is that these guys need reps. And I understand you don't want to try and compromise the game, but I don't know if these guys have gotten enough actual minutes and reps in games in high leverage situations because of the fact that they've been so reliant on a bunch of things, including 3-pointers from Marquise Reed and Gabe DeVoe, and still a reticence to use Elijah Thomas on the offensive end.
Well, it's been, shoot the three or try to drive it sometimes in the intermediate range and let the guys down low pick up the crumbs. And that can be difficult for Clemson. But I still feel good about Clemson because, guys, all this year we've seen every team we follow get into a slump and drop 3 or 4 games in a row and then come out on the other side, and then they wake up. If you can get those 2 guys back from injury, I think Clemson can still.
Well, you're
not getting Grantham back.
Well, I'm not talking about Grantham, but the
Shelton
Mitchell.
Yeah.
If you get him back, I think still, because of their guard play when they're in tandem, this team can still do some damage in the ACC tournament.
If I'm Elijah Thomas, I'm frustrated right now because I went 5 for 5. I had 12 points and 10 rebounds, and I feel like I'm not getting any touches in my mind.
Well, I mean, Reed jacked it up 28 times last night. So
24,
he's getting the boat. 28 points on 24 shots?
Yes.
Clemson's RPI still 10 after last night. Joe Lunardi, his new bracket today, the Tigers have been dropped to a 5 seed, playing Loyola of Chicago in Boise.
I hate that.
Just ask Woody Danzler about Boise.
We're not going to Boise.
Charleston, College of Charleston, he has as a 14 seed, playing North Carolina in Nashville still. And Winthrop he has as a 15 seed, playing Duke in Charlotte.
The only way that you're getting me to go to Boise is if you're packing me in a bag and sending me there via UPS.
I'll go.
Wow.
I love to go to Boise.
Really?
Boise is beautiful in March.
Well, my sister.
I'll do a little, I'm kind of into the skiing thing now.
Get out.
After the Olympics. I may do a little curling while I'm there as well. They got a little curling track there in Boise.
You can't ski.
I don't know, but my sister
can barely walk up the damn stairs. We can't ski.
Now, my sister will tell you, Will, that she lives in Washington State. She says Boise is very underrated. She likes Boise.
I applied for a job in Boise when I was a desperate senior in college.
I'm sure you didn't get it.
I did. I did not. I actually lost out.
Gee, imagine why.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
They didn't want me either. It's fine.
Let's go to Glenn before we hit the bottom of the hour break. We don't want him to expire while he's on hold there. The phone call. Glenn, welcome in. How are you?
Hey, welcome in, guys. This is a pleasure to talk to you, Mr. Corn and company.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to congratulate Will. 4-0, I think, still Tigers in baseball still. So, unless they lost one last night, I couldn't catch the game last night.
Why are you congratulating me?
Because you're a Clemson man.
Well, you're a Clemson fan.
No, I'm not. That's completely erroneous, man. That's completely
They are
erroneous.
4-0, Glenn. They are 4-0.
They didn't play last night, though.
Yes, you missed Monty Lee. Monty Lee was with us on the show last night, so
he didn't, and which I'm sad I missed. Apparently,
as much as he loves being on with us, he doesn't talk to us from the dugout.
No,
I couldn't go on with you guys last night because they had South Carolina basketball on.
Yeah.
Epitaph, yeah. I missed the latter half.
Well, if you listen,
I enjoy hearing you.
If you miss us anytime when we're on the air, you can go to our website, sportstalksc.com, and pull up our YouTube feed via Google Hangout, or go to TuneIn Radio, the TuneIn Radio app, and pull up the Point Radio WQXL, the affiliate there. They never preempt us for any reason.
Exactly. Thank you for your phone call, Glenn. When we come back from the break, Mike Morgan will be here. We'll catch up with Mike. I think he did the Auburn game last night.
Yes, he did.
That sounds right.
So we'll talk with him about basketball happenings around the SEC and the ACC and anything else that's on his mind. Maybe, it's about time we start chatting him up for the Braves, because that was the original reason for starting our Mike Morgan segments years ago, was for the Braves. And Braves were good when we started, then they became bad, and I guess they're still bad.
The Barves?
Going into this year.
The Barves, you mean?
All right, we'll be right back.
everything happened today instead of tomorrow.
That's a good thing. We can cruise into a Friday because everything is coming down today.
Friday news dump on a Thursday. And if you have anything you want to dump today, because probably get lost in the shuffle.
I have nothing to share. All right, we are back. Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, Professor Tom Hayes, USC women playing their final home game tonight, tipping off over at the Colonial Life Arena. Right about now, we'll keep you up to date on that one. No baseball today around the state of South Carolina. Everybody getting ready for their weekend series, including USC, Charleston Southern, in Columbia, Clemson, and Dallas Baptist. That's a good, high-profile national weekend series at Doug Kingsmore. Let's welcome in for another edition of Morgan on the Move here on Sports Talk, none other than Mike Morgan, who obviously has been on the move, bouncing from one arena to the next around the SEC in particular. And he is brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union, where their mortgage team is more equipped than ever to help you with the mortgage process. Check them out at foundersfcu.com/mortgage. And by BP Skinner Clothiers. Around the country, people get their custom-made suits and accessories from Brent Skinner, the very best in suits, shirts, pants, shoes, and more, available to you right in the Vista in Columbia, online at bpskinnerclothiers.com. All right, Mike, good to have you with us once again. You got a close-up look last night at Auburn. Looks like they recovered from their debacle in Columbia, got back on the winning track, and a couple of more weekends to go. Looks like they'll be lifting the trophy for the regular season championship unless they just kind of fall apart here down the stretch.
Well, they're in the driver's seat. There's so no question about that. And I think what they've been able to do is amazing. For those that didn't follow the game at all last night, I think by now most people are familiar with the injury, particularly those in South Carolina. It happened in Columbia, the injury to Macklemore, their top rim protector and one of their better three-point shooters. That was debilitating enough. That put them down to 8 scholarship players. And then Bruce Pearl told us at shoot-around, yeah, we're not going to have Mustafa today. He's got a stomach virus, so we're down to 7. And at that point, we're all looking around like, really? I mean, what are you guys going to do? Alabama came in as the number 1 ranked defensive team in the league. They've got a bunch of weapons. They've got a lottery pick in Colin Sexton, who I actually think will be drafted ahead of Trae Young. And yet Alabama got throttled late in that ball game in front of the loudest crowd I've been in front of all year. So if Bruce Pearl is not your SEC Coach of the Year, he might be your national Coach of the Year. And yet there's still this, there's overwhelming obvious concern about what's going to happen when everything shakes down. But I know one thing is for sure, they got a hell of a team right now at Auburn, and he's a big reason why.
Well, they still got the cloud of the investigation, the FBI thing hanging over them, and that's going to even intensify when you get to the NCAA tournament because the national media is just going to pile on Auburn and the fact that they've had such a great year, yet this other thing has gone unanswered. But to wrap them up, they still have to go on the road to Florida, still have to go on the road to Arkansas, and then they finish up with South Carolina. They've got a 2-game lead, but nothing is clinched yet. They could. I mean, you could see them stumbling on the road, could you not, in these next 2 trips, possibly?
Oh, sure. I'd be surprised if they won out, if they won every game left on the schedule. I think it could very well come down to the last game, and we could have co-champions. They don't actually use a tiebreaker for the regular season, even though Auburn defeated Tennessee earlier in the year. But for whatever reason, we don't use that as a tiebreaker. We just deem them co-champions if that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you've got the SEC tournament in St. Louis, and at that point, Auburn is already in. They'll snap the longest drought in the SEC for not appearing in the tournament. That did belong to South Carolina before last year. Auburn has not been since 2003. They still have an outside chance of being a number 1 seed or at least a number 2 seed, and that does matter. I mean, every game truly is relevant this time of the year as you're continuing to kind of fill out your resume and try to get into the tournament and then get the best seed possible once you're there.
A little outside your purview, Mike, but I wonder if you have any reaction to not only the action taken today by South Carolina women's coach Dawn Staley, but also the action taken also by the SEC against Missouri Athletic Director Jim Sturk.
I caught the on the news cycle earlier the lawsuit. What was the action that the SEC took?
$25,000 fine for Sturk, and they're going to look at the South Carolina security policies from the SEC office.
Oh, okay. I won't pretend to know everything that went down that night, other than to say I know it was a televised game, and if there was somebody who spit on somebody, I haven't heard anybody see that on camera.
Right.
And I have a feeling I would have if that actually was caught somewhere on tape on the arena. Anybody could say someone said something. I know a few years ago, if you remember, Marcus Smart, now with the Celtics, was playing for Oklahoma State. They were playing at Texas Tech, and he got into it with a fan and wound up kind of shoving the fan. In an obvious case of a young man who kind of lost his cool. And then after the fact, he said, "Oh yeah, well he said the N-word." Well, I actually did a game there a few weeks later, and I mean nobody heard it said, which it wouldn't be the first time somebody has made that up. And I don't know if that's the case here. I do know it's very unusual for an athletic director to go on to a talk show and use that kind of demeanor in terms of talking about a rival school in the Southeastern Conference. Typically, ADs avoid that if at all possible. Even if it was the worst of the worst environment, to kind of throw another school and another coach out by name under the bus, it's almost unprecedented. So it's unfortunate it got to this point. I thought by now the AD would have issued an apology and just kind of everybody would have moved on, but obviously that has not happened.
Mike, looking at the tournament coming up, I really can't figure who's wearing whose uniform on any given night. Ole Miss is left for dead. Andy Kennedy leaves. Madlock takes over as interim coach. They waltz into Missouri and win a ball game. Vanderbilt has been very dangerous the last couple of weeks, knocking off teams. Where in the world, who's going to win the SEC tournament? I can't figure it out.
Well, number one, to your point, it's the deepest, and I'm almost tired of saying this now because everybody's saying it. I felt this way back in November. I think I said it on your show then that I thought this would be the deepest the league would be in 10 years. I was wrong. It's the deepest the league has been in over 20. It's even deeper than I thought it would be. And you're going to be looking at a conference that is likely going to get 8. Now, there are some people just kind of waving the SEC banner and saying, "We can get 12 in." I mean, at some point, you got to be honest and realistic about it. If you really do your homework, no conference is getting 12 teams or 11 teams. I think the SEC would be ecstatic to get 8, very happy to get 7. And it's a sign of extreme progress for that to happen. And when you look at it, it's not an outlier. It's not, a blip off the radar in that this conference is not going anywhere anytime soon. The coaching is too good. The amount of talent coming back next year is too good. The facilities, the fan interest, the money, the exposure, all right now are at an all-time high for the SEC. So to circle back around to your question, I don't think anybody can win it. I think there's probably about 5 teams that I really would say are in the best shape. Auburn and Tennessee would certainly be at or near the top of that list. And then there's sneaky, dangerous teams. And Arkansas could be scary. And Alabama could be scary. I know they just got throttled last night, but that's still a team that nobody wants to face. So I think there's 4 or 5 teams that could actually win it.
All right, Mike, hang on. I want to hold you over for a couple of minutes. I want to get your thoughts on Clemson and the Tigers' current dilemma, their 3-game losing streak. Can they recover to maintain a very solid position in the NCAA tournament? They were knocking on the door of a number 2 seed. If you go by the national guys, Lenardi, now he's got him as a number 5. How much longer is this slide going to be for Clemson? Get your thoughts on that and wrap it up with Mike in a moment.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
And one of the reasons for that, besides me, is the visit from Mike Morgan here weekly on Sports Talk, our Morgan on the Move segment. As we wrap it up with Mike, I wanted to ask him a couple of other things. Before we get to Clemson, your take on what came down with Louisville this week. And also, I don't know, I just have a sneaky suspicion Brian Bowen in South Carolina on the court may never happen. Your thoughts on that? You disagree with me 100% on that, or do you think that's a possibility?
I don't know if I could sit here and disagree 100%. Every indication that I got before was that he was going to play, but obviously some other things. I mean, nobody knows when that final bomb is dropped, whenever that is in this whole FBI thing. If you read the Pete Thamel article, I mean, then you really are concerned about what the heck is going to happen to who. I mean, he's talking about Hall of Fame coaches, and he's talking about blue blood programs, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if it's going to be that dramatic, but I also wouldn't want to minimize it to the point that nothing is going to fall out from all this. So I couldn't answer that question without that insight. I don't know who can, to be honest with you right now. To the question of Louisville, I was there when they won the national championship. It was the first Final Four I ever attended. It was here in Atlanta. I watched Louisville defeat Michigan. I watched them win the semifinal before that. You're not going to convince me that they're not the national champion. If you want to go ahead and levy sanctions and hammer them and make them pay and do this and that, great. Go right ahead. I won't lose any sleep over it. But the whole idea of vacating championships is just silly. It's an exercise in silliness and futility. It doesn't change what people saw. You can't replay the game. And to me, it basically punishes most of the people that weren't involved as opposed to the people that were. And it does not serve as a deterrent to the people that are already cheating anyway. So I think it's just stupidity, outright stupidity. I'll defend the NCAA on some things, but that is just ridiculous beyond belief. Forgive me, I forgot your other question.
I like that he used the word deterrent. That's my word. I like that.
He probably took it from you. I'm sure you created it.
He did not.
Finally, Clemson, 3-game losing skid, and Brownell last night, starting to point the finger at the injury bug and missing, the two guys that he's been missing here. Of course, Grantham's not coming back. They hope that Mitchell could be back for Saturday. Their bench is short. They got nothing from their bench last night. Tough place to play up at Virginia Tech against a very good team that's going to go to the tournament as well. But can the Tigers turn this thing around with what they've got and kind of reestablish themselves as maybe a top 4 national seed?
You mean get on the 4 line is what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think they can get on the 4 line. I think that's possible. Right now you're playing in a league where you're looking up at Virginia, North Carolina, and Duke. They're behind those 3 teams, obviously. But overall, the metrics are good to Clemson, except for one thing. And you're going to hear this term, so let's all break out our pocket protectors and our tape-up glasses for the nerdy segment of the show, and that is Quadrant 1 win.
I told you he was going to say Quadrant 1. I knew it.
Who came up with this stuff? Who came up with this quadrant stuff all of a sudden?
The committee. It's just another metric.
Cord hates analytics. If you don't know this by now,
I understand that. Well, Cord, don't kill the messenger. Do you want me to tell you why it's important, or do you want to just sigh?
Move on. .org.
They are 2-7 in Quadrant 1 wins, and that's the lowest amount for a team that's where they are, which is very good in RPI and BPI and everything else. So when they're splitting hairs to figure out if a team like Clemson is a 4 seed or a 5 seed or a 3 seed, I promise you that number will come up in the room.
What do you think of the Gamecocks over the last 3? Just real quickly, Mike.
It proves what I've known all along, and that is Frank gets more out of less. That he refuses to let his team mail it in and quit. They're still outmanned more times than not. I still believe some of the wins that they have are are just more effort and coaching based than they are, who the talent is on the floor. Georgia had to have that game in a lot of ways, and South Carolina basically is derailing Mark Fox's season by beating him twice. That's what South Carolina does. Nobody wants to play them. They make you play ugly. They play hard as heck, and guys just overachieve. So I give prop in a season that's not going to be nearly as exciting as the last one was. I still give props to Frank the way he's kind of kept this team together and kept them playing hard.
All right, last thing. You think Fox is histoire?
I have no idea. That has been speculated. It seems like 5 out of the last 9 years he's been there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what the expectation is. You've got an AD that's there that didn't hire him in the first place. There were times when people just thought that Georgia didn't care about basketball. That's not the case anymore. Georgia, like everybody else in the SEC, has pumped in a lot of money into the facilities. And I think a lot of those fans who have been showing up, by the way, they've had several sellout crowds. They still believe that they should be a winner in basketball and be going to NCAA tournament. So hard to say how that's going to turn out, but I think that conversation will certainly be had for the next few weeks, at least in the public and the media's eyes.
As always, we appreciate it, Mike. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Where are you going to be this weekend? You got an assignment?
I am heading to Tuscaloosa. I have Arkansas at Alabama, two teams that'll be in the tournament and 2 teams that are a lot of fun to watch and are still playing to kind of move up the ladder as we keep talking about seeding. They're all battling for a higher seed.
All right, my friend. Thank you. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay, guys.
Mike Morgan on the move with us here on Sports Talk.
I knew he'd be mad at you'd be mad at him with the quadrant 1 wins.
Yeah, I've been reading about that stuff, and I'm like, it makes my head hurt.
My point is this: I think any committee has looked at all those parameters, but this is what they did. Look, here's what we're looking at. Let's put it in a nice, bright new package and rename it Quadrant 1. BS.
A quadrant 1 win is a home win against the teams in the top 30, a neutral win against teams in the top 50, or a road win against teams in the top 75. Does that help? Does that help you?
Yeah, I mean, I knew what it was. I've read the definition.
But
you know what?
But they've looked at that before. They just hadn't called it.
I just want to give it a fancy name.
It's more of a standardized formula. We've been talking about how they don't have a standardized formula or they're not transparent enough. Well, now they're being transparent about it.
No, they're not being transparent. What they do is they're building rules so they can have an excuse. It's the case I was making. Whenever, if it's a North Carolina, somebody's struggling, let's come up with names that gets them in the tournament. If it's a team like South Carolina, let's ask questions that lead them out. You can tell the way they talk when they talk about certain teams.
Paranoid.
No,
15-12 USC females over LSU.
Final regular season home game for Asia Wilson.
You think? She's got 11 points and 9 rebounds in a quarter and 2 minutes. 11 points and 9 rebounds. I mean, clearly she's the national, SEC player of the year again, I think you would say, right? Or do they want to go with somebody else? And then what about the national player of the year?
They might go for somebody from Mississippi State.
Yeah.
I can see them making that argument, but nobody else. The USC
Blair Schaefer is pretty good.
The USC ladies, only 2 players have scored. She's got 11, and Grissett has got 4. Nobody else has scored in over a quarter of play, over 12 minutes of action. Those are the only 2. That can't make Dawn Staley happy. And this LSU team's kind of hanging around 15-12.
Well, they're not a bad team. They're top 25 in the nation.
All right, we do have Give and Go both lined up for our next segment, so stay tuned for that. Recruiting coming up as well, plus some comments from Frank Martin and from Brad Brownell. The money coach, Fran Halloran, at the bottom of the next hour. We got so much good stuff for you. Of course, you don't want to leave us. Take us with you if you're getting home. Take us into the house on your smartphone, your iPad.
Or just say, Alexa, play Sports Talk with Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and Tom Hayes.
Would that work?
Sure.
Okay, try it out. Be right back.